everybody. You're listening to, and if you're joining us through the Facebook Live, you're watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz,
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
and we are your hairy heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy heavy homo to listen in or possibly stream in. And for tonight's show, we're going to be talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, the latest entry in the MCU series of films. And we've got things to talk about, and two of the three of us had absolutely lousy days. So, in keeping with a tradition on this show, for two of us, today was La Bamba.
I'm not laughing at the crappy days you guys had. I always laugh at La Bamba.
But I've been looking forward to talking to you two gentlemen the entire day, and that just kept getting amplified more and more as the shit piled on. So I'm so glad to be talking with you two.
There's a certain level of catharsis to be able to get together and talk with friends about things that we enjoy, right? Like, and you know, I get it now why people used to, and some people still do, go to like the local pub or the local watering hole to like just chat with folks at the end of the day, and that's 100. It's cathartic. Like, I love comics, love talking, and I love you guys. So like, just to be on here at the end of a shit day, it really does just like alleviate. It's like a breath, like a deep breath at the end of the day.
And I know I scared you for that brief second where you thought I was typing "we should cancel."
Yeah. So just behind the scenes baseball in our little group chat. Like, I'm sitting at work today and I see Bill pop up and typing, and it says, "Caleb had a crap day. I had a crap day," and I'm like, if Bill cancels, I'm gonna go jump in the river right now.
Yeah.
I'm just done. I'm tapping out. Wasn't actually going to do that. I was just like, I will cry. I will cry right here in my office,
Brother.
But he didn't.
Let me tell you, if you were jumping in the river, you might have hit my body first.
It'll be me and you floating like those otters that hold hands as we just float away.
The one thing about having a bad day is the odds that the next day will be worse are so slim. So that's giving me some comfort.
It's gotten. I will say my day has gotten better.
So Mine has too. Yeah. Mine has too. So. But yeah,
that's good.
Whoa. As I said, La Bamba. But something, whether it was La Bamba or not, we'll find out in our discussion in terms of what we felt about it. And that's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, Steve, are you still comfortable in giving the plot synopsis? Because we didn't really cover this in our prep, but you've been so good in it in the past. So,
yeah, I guess it's like the third Ant-Man, right? So, like, what kind of crazy talk would we be talking about?
There's like ants. All right,
there's like ants and stuff.
There are ants. There were only a few.
Yeah, just a few ants. Yes, only a few ants. Yeah. So of course, Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is the third film in the Ant-Man franchise, and I guess the second film in the Ant-Man and the Wasps franchise. For Scott Lang, it's the third full outing where he's one of the main characters of the film. Quantumania, of course, named for the quantum realm that became a plot point in the second outing, the Ant-Man and the Wasp. And also, I guess, in the first one a little bit too. But anyway, so what happens in the quantum realm? Well, Janet Van Dyne was rescued in the second film. Spoilers for that, and spoilers will be coming ahead for this movie.
Yeah, we can't really talk about this without spoiling. So
yeah, I mean, there's too much that goes on. But
when I release the audio episode, I'll give you the mark if you want to just cut forward. So. For people, but sometimes you encounter a movie that you really can't talk about it without spoiling most of it, and this is one of them.
So this is. I'll try for the synopsis. I'll try not to spoil too much. But so Janet Van Dyne, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, was rescued in the second film, Ant-Man and the Wasp. She had been living in the quantum realm for, gosh, what was it, 30 years, about, give or take. And of course, when she was rescued, she didn't really talk much about what she encountered, just that she had been surviving during that time. Well, fast forward to this film, and here after the blip, Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, is meeting some success. He's written a book. He's got a podcast. He's pretty popular. People know who he is, more or less. And his daughter, Cassie, played by Catherine Newton, who's actually a newcomer. She's the third actress to play Cassie. Um, she's also kind of experiencing a bit more action, trying to help people. Um, Knowing that she's the daughter of an Avenger, she wants to get out there and help people as well. So, with the help of both Janet Van Dyne as well as Hank Pym, uh, played by Michael Douglas again for the third time. Um, they have been helping her, and she's been creating a project to look more into the quantum realm itself, to see if there's maybe a way to get down in there, to map it, to see what there is to see in the quantum realm. And she didn't really get too much information from Janet. So she, Hope Van Dyne, played by Evangeline Lilly, and Hank Pym have been kind of doing this on their own. Well, the demonstration of this sort of beacon or mapping program that they have for the quantum realm understandably backfires and sucks them all in, including an entire supercomputer advance, into the quantum realm itself, where they're separated out. Cassie and Scott are separated out from Hank, Janet, and Hope, and encountering a whole bunch of really crazy stuff, different monsters, creatures, bizarre landscapes, and what happens to be sort of the remnants of a rebellion. We find out a little bit more about what's been going on in the quantum realm, why Janet has not been in a hurry to get back, and of course, we get introduced to the big bad, who happens to be Kang. So that's kind of the long and short of the first half of the movie. The second half, of course, is the fight against Kang. A lot of other stuff happens, and it gets pretty dang wild in the final act. And very, very wacky. I think we can kind of go from there and then have some more spoilers when we talk about what we feel, how they wrapped it up, the action, the antagonist, and all of that. So, what were your guys' feelings about this movie?
I'll jump in first. So I I thought it was fun. There were some part like so you get a character who's not really associated, and I guess we're doing spoilers, so we can go ahead and go with it.
Spoilers now.
You get characters like MODOK in this, which was unexpected because when I think MODOK, I think X-Men, right? Like I don't think Ant-Man, and I don't think
That's
or I guess
that's funny. I've never thought of MODOK as X-Men. I've always thought Captain America.
I see. I think X-Men. I think him running that the weird secret world where X Factor and all them go into, and you get Shatterstar and all of those people. Like that's
That's
where
Mojo.
Are you thinking Mojo?
that
Thinking
is Mojo. I'm thinking
Oh.
Mojo.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I'm 100% thinking Mojo. Okay, cut that out. I sound like an idiot. No, but so I think MODOK. I think something just way different. But still, even in that regard, I thought it was interesting how they looped him into this and made him
Mhm.
like an Ant-Man, not even a villain, almost like there was almost like a redemption story, and tied him into some of the back characters with that. Um, I felt like it was very formulaic, like most Marvel films are. But particularly with this one, and we'll touch on it more later. Um, Steve, you mentioned the supercomputer ants, right? Like,
Mhm.
and from the very get go, you're like, oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
going to come. That's Chekhov's gun. So we're going to get more of that later. But for a character like when you have a character like Kang, who fancies himself a god in some sense, he's beyond time, he manipulates time. Um, there's a lot of moments in this where if you were watching any other movie, you'd be like, well, this is just a big Deus Ex Machina. Like this
Mhm.
is this is dumb. This is just bad writing. I actually think it was done purposefully, and to use like the Deus Ex Machina as a plot point and like have it show up in multiple ways as a plot device for a
Mhm.
Kang story, I thought was pretty cool. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I thought it was fun. Like I was like, okay, like we're dealing with somebody who is a god, and so you're literally getting all of these hand of God moments that come in and right the ship no matter what. Like there's almost like this meta thing where time is fighting back, and I thought that was cool. It The quantum realm in this feels a lot like the negative zone in
Mhm.
other
Yeah.
stories, and I picked up on that. I thought it was. I'm basically going down like my little bullet points of things here. I thought it was interesting how they had their cake and tried to eat it too with Janet, which by the way I've never understood that phrase. But so Janet, like for somebody who was gone for 30 years, she sunk back into the family dynamic very comfortably,
Mhm.
very quickly. Like picked up where she's left, but also didn't tell them anything. Kept her secrets and was very aloof when she needed to be. So it was almost like okay, the character was wishy washy. She was
Mm.
both just deep and hadn't missed a step and was the love of Hank's life forever. And like they had this connection. It was almost like she was never gone. To wait, I don't know you like that, bro. Like that's why like you can't expect me to tell you these things. So there was like this weird disconnect with that. But it was necessary, I guess, for what they were doing with some of the foreshadowing and just keeping the viewer on the edge of the seat. Um, Overall, like Ant Man for me, and like the actual character of Ant Man for me in this film was overshadowed, like just by all the personalities in the room,
Mhm.
which was
It's like
fine because there were a lot of good personalities in the room. And
see
Yeah.
me for me, if I can just interject, that
yeah,
was my biggest problem with the first Black Panther film.
yeah,
That the supporting cast was so strong, which is always wonderful to see, but there were points where he felt like a bystander in his own film.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there was a little bit of this in Ant-Man. Not so much that it took me out and not to the degree that I thought it was present in Black Panther, but I absolutely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Mm.
But other than like those are just little nits to pick. At the end of the day, when it comes to a Marvel movie, like we've had so many of them at this point, and they've ranged the gamut of just being excellent, like some of the best movies I've ever seen to La Bamba. That at the end of the day, I just want to be entertained. Like I
Yeah.
like going to the movies with my husband. Like it's a date night for us. So I want something fun. Show me something cool and quirky. Move the story along. Give me some decent acting. I'm not the world's biggest fan of comedy in general, so when it comes to really lighthearted stuff like this, it's already going to be. I'm just not super tapped into it. And the weak points to me when they were trying to in the film where they were trying to force the joke.
Mhm.
Michael Douglas had a lot of moments where I was like, that delivery just didn't work.
Yeah.
And so that was just it for me. But again, not Mojo. So I don't know why my brain just went to that, but I I thought tethering Modoc to this um, is interesting, right? Like
Mhm.
it's a twist on it that works somehow,
Mhm.
even if it did feel like it was a video game script at times, um,
Mm.
or 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 even like moments where I'm like, oh, this feels like a blip out of like a ride uh, at Disneyland. Like
Mm.
the way that the
Oh,
CGI works out and stuff moves around. Like this feels like a Harry Potter ride at like Universal Studios or something like that. So
Honey, I
little
Shrunk the
disconnect.
Heroes.
Yeah, yeah. Like so, but
yeah.
it was ultimately I had a blast watching it. Raj had a good time. It was fun.
Mm.
Yeah.
I got to see Hank Pym, and like as an OG Marvels fan, as somebody who's literally looking at Janet Van Dyne on my wall right now, getting more Janet and more Hank in my stories, fighting just a classic um, Avengers baddie. I'm
Mhm.
down for it, and I love. You want to talk about the pinnacle, the mountaintop for this movie is Majors, right? Like his
Yeah.
performance was outstanding. It stole the show, and I just want to see more of that.
Absolutely.
I have to say Jonathan Majors almost made me like Kang. Um,
Right?
I
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
think as a character, I've never connected with it, and um, again, we just referred to him as Majors. We should specify Jonathan Majors as the actor
Yeah,
who portrayed
Jonathan Majors,
uh,
who's
Kang
in
initially.
everything. He's
But
in
yeah,
everything now.
but so far that we've seen, he's only been in Loki and in this
Yeah.
of the stuff that we've seen. Um, Jack Kirby did a lot of fantastic character designs. Kang ain't one of them. You know, I mean, with the airline pillow head and it never felt. If you take the car analogy, you always want a car that was built on a Monday and not on a Friday. The Inhumans were built on a Monday in terms of character designs. I
Yeah.
mean, Black Bolt is just exquisite,
Yep.
and Kang was a Friday design. Um, it's a convoluted story that's always backed him, but I think they have done pretty well. If Jonathan Majors, with his really, really on target performance, and with some of the past works but written by Kurt Busiek, if those two couldn't make me like Kang, nothing can.
Mm.
And I know we're going to be talking about some of that a little bit later. Uh, I did think it was overloaded as a film. And I thought that was to the detriment of both Michael Douglas and the Wasp. What's her name? I can't believe
Michelle Pfeiffer.
no, Evangeline Lilly.
Yeah, Evangeline Lilly.
She's the Wasp.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But I
Again.
think there were some holes in the film. One big one I have that goes back to Kang is we never see how brutal he is. We never see that. Uh, when Janet Pym touches the ship and it's neural renal, I don't know what the hell the psych science was for that. Um, we see flashes, but we don't have a moment of that. And I think if we did have a moment where we really saw his brutality, it's hinted at bits through the film, but you never really have that moment where, oh, this is a real bad guy. You never have that moment. They tell you it, but you never really see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that gets complicated because we do see at the end that there is a council of Kang variants, and they seem like pretty much together, at least up in the
Mhm.
brain. So for me, that was, I think, a missed opportunity because I think that would have had a lot more emotional resonance for both as you're seeing the film and also with the bumper, because you'll get how the stakes are so high.
Right.
When they do mention you don't know what's coming, I thought for sure at one moment it was going to be Galactus.
Yes,
Yes, I
I
really
had that same
and
thought.
I felt, especially like as you said that the Quantumania was so close to how I've envisioned, some other concepts like whether it's the negative zone or the Cancerverse. Um, that would have been such a great opportunity to just give you a little taste. Uh-oh, those are some cosmic rays that just got out. you know um I thought that would have been a really interesting device to start introducing the two major franchises that haven't come into the MCU yet,
Right.
but we know are destined for it. um in terms of Janet, I love Wasp as a character.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the original Avengers, only Cap, since he has founder status, is above her in terms of favor. And I thought Michelle Pfeiffer did well, but um, that whole like struggling to tell people, it didn't make sense after a point. You know, I mean,
Mhm.
they can see this as a weird world, and that you would have to take drastic measures
Right.
uh, given certain circumstances, and they don't strike me as the type of individuals that would have an issue with that. But I did like a lot of how the Pims were um, portrayed. I actually really buy Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas as a couple that, through the disruption, though, were a longtime couple and
Mm-hmm.
the true
Mhm.
loves of each other's lives. I really did buy that. But with some of the particular plot holes, I know they, especially given the first film, how well crafted that first Ant-Man is. That's way up there on my listing. I mean, I'm not going to I see these people that are all listing their favorite MCU films in order, and I'm like, that's a lot of film. I don't have time for that.
Mm.
But it's up there. Um, and especially with given that this is a franchise that has had movies that have really worked the action comedy balance well in some of the Thors and particularly the first Guardians.
Yeah.
I was a bit surprised that they didn't coalesce that a little bit better. Uh, I'm sounding like a negative ninny here though, but I do come away with the same um, verdict that it appears that you do, Caleb, is that I had a fun time while it was going on. The nitpicking aside that I just prevented, which I do think are valid points. It's still a popcorn movie, and for the most part, it does succeed
Yeah.
in that. Yeah.
It's
So I'm going to agree
interesting.
with I'm going to agree with both
I
of
was
you
going to say
real
real
quick.
quick.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring up Guardians too, because I really like. I had this moment. There was a moment where we were sitting in the theater, and my husband and I looked at each other, and we were like, "This like." And he said at first, he was like, "This feels like Guardians to me," and it did, but in a Guardians 1 kind of way, not a Guardians 2 kind of way.
Mhm.
Because I didn't care for the second Guardians movie, but it really did feel like the first Guardians movie, which was an interesting take for an Ant-Man film. Like it really had this team dynamic that I don't think I was expecting from a solo character or a duo character film, but it ended up having that, and I think that worked in its favor really, really well.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, my feel of it, like, just going into the idea of like if it felt like a Guardians movie. I think the design of this film was trying pretty hard to look like a cosmic Marvel movie. So there's you know a lot of what you would see in Guardians, a lot of what you would have seen in Thor Ragnarok, with these really cool alien designs, these really cool sort of strange technologies, and lots of use of biomechanics. It's a really interesting way to present the quantum realm or the quantum universe. But I think that in the hands of a James Gunn or a Taika Waititi, the humor would have fit more,
Yeah.
and I think the wacky scenario would have been a little bit more joyful, and which is, I think, the one major criticism I have with this movie is that I go into an Ant-Man movie expecting it to be a lot funnier. The first one was hilarious. The second one had some really great moments to it. This one didn't really have a lot of fun moments, like funny moments. It had some like, oh, that's neat. Oh, that's kind of interesting, but nothing that made me really, laugh
And
out
I
loud.
think that was especially a blown opportunity given the great chemistry that Cassie and Scott had.
Yeah.
And they had
Absolutely,
they were
absolutely.
she absolutely felt uh
Stature.
like his daughter.
Stature.
She
Absolutely,
was my
she
stature.
absolutely no, I'm telling you,
Yeah,
she absolutely felt like his daughter.
Yeah.
yeah.
You
Oh
know,
yeah.
and that was also
Like,
another thing I really liked about the Pims is that she already calls him grandpa and grandma.
yeah.
That they took her in and all. I just like that's like the best of the Pims to me.
It's
So
it is it's
I like that a
definitely
lot. Yeah.
it's definitely one of those things where the cast itself very, I mean, they did a great job. The cast did a great job. The Pim, Hank and Janet and and Hope, everybody was so well portrayed in this, and they had great chemistry together. I think that the setting could have been modified a little bit to make it really, really shine. There were moments of this movie where it felt kind of empty for something that had so much thrown into it, so many
Now
effects, so
I
many
have to
designs.
ask
There were
you.
moments that were
This is
kind of
something I've
empty.
been thinking a lot about. We are in an area where actors are filming more against green screens than being on actual sets.
Right.
Hmm.
And I did feel that there was a little bit of a spatial
Lost in the room.
Yes.
Yep.
room, yeah,
Yeah.
where that no matter what quality actor you have, sometimes you can't get around that. But then again, sometimes it doesn't matter. Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, had full sets in almost every scene, and that's lacking.
Yeah,
Uh, so
yeah.
it depends, but I did feel that very likely the shooting situations that the actors were involved with contributed to that dynamic that you're talking about, Steve.
I feel that too, and I mean we can talk about the special effects. I can say,
We should.
you know,
It's
it
a
it, it
it's a
was
point.
the special effects were bright. There was a lot of them. Like you said, acting against a green screen. In this case, it was acting as well with that technology that was, really pioneered by the Mandalorian, which is sort of like the set itself is CGI. Like there's a projection that goes around, the acting and the setting itself that they can modify and digitally manipulate, and actually have there. Um, I think you're right. There's a lot of that. Where the actors are kind of acting against an empty room, or a CGI character that they'll draw in later. That kind of thing. There's a lot of those kinds of moments, and of course, the biggest action moments, you really don't need to have any physical actors at all, because a lot of them were pulled back. You saw these big action moments, especially when Ant-Man, it becomes Giant Man and starts storming Kang City, and there's just thousands upon thousands of just CGI things that are happening without much in the way of actual physical actors portraying things that are happening. There's the big MODOK issue with how he appears. I personally feel that there's really no really great way to portray more MODOK in a live action film that would look that much better. It's an odd character. It's a very bizarre design. It looked like when he had the mask off, with the mask on, looked awesome, because there's really you don't really need a human face on that. But when he took the mask off and you saw the stretched out Corey, oh gosh, what's his name? The
Stoll.
actor
Corey
Corey
Stoll.
Stoll. It just looked like he was fuzzy. Like there was
Yeah.
something fuzzy
Yeah.
about it.
I
That it just stretched.
The digital
Very
distortion
strange.
worked against it for me, and it really
Yeah.
did feel like there were parts in the film, and again, I like Bill said, I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy. I
Yeah.
enjoyed this
And
film. I would go see it again, and like I had a great time. But there were
I want to see it in 3D and feel that ride. That's what I
there were
want to. I
parts
want
of
the ride.
this. There were parts of it where it felt like bad Photoshop. I'm just like
Mm.
like, but again, like you said, I don't know that there's a great way to do that character just because it is so distorted. But
Mhm.
also, we live in a world where we just saw MODOK's ass. Like what's happening, guys? Like,
It is
who
interesting.
asked for this? And thank you for whoever did, because
Yeah, I mean,
like,
it's why not? Why
yeah,
now we have
if
seen
we're
Modoc's ass.
we've got these characters, and at the end of the day, they are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that they're trying to play up for him. And I agree with Bill. Like Kang's design has never been my favorite, but I appreciate the fact that they're trying to play it up. I like that about it. Like it feels comic booky, and that's what I want. Like to me, Kang's design, Kang specifically, it always felt like Kirby had thrown a sketch, a preliminary sketch of like Trinary, or the three headed being, the Celestial, on the
Yep.
floor, and then picked it up and was like, "Yeah, we'll make him a person, and we'll like okay, there's a lot of padding there, so we'll just fill in the sides with some padding." But like, I like that they're playing up that look and the ridiculousness of it all.
Hmm.
And the same thing with the actual characters themselves, with the Wasp and with Ant Man. Like, I like that, but there's a certain level where CGI only goes so far, and it just, there's some weird things happening here. And with the backgrounds, especially, there was a lot of rinse and repeat backgrounds throughout the film that I was like, okay, we've seen this skyline before. Um, so but hey, it saved money, so maybe they did something else with the money. So just go with it. But
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been pretty well publicized just how many visual effects houses Disney
mhm,
used for this particular film. And if you've seen in the credits, it's been that way for a while.
yeah,
yeah.
Uh, and as I was telling these guys before we got on, being an older fella, I have a very low bar in terms of being impressed by special effects. As someone who grew up with the Donner Superman, that's
Mhm.
about as good as it got for us, at least in terms of superhero films. So everything impresses me, but this was the first time that I saw a Marvel movie that I did, and again, particularly with Modoc, felt that some of the end result was a bit janky,
Yeah.
and when you have had other situations, particularly that's a tough word sometimes. Eternals, which
Yeah.
Mhm.
was in the same situation but melded much more
Yeah.
efficiently. I did think this was a film that looked like that there were multiple VFX houses at play
Yeah.
that didn't talk to each other.
I and I've heard
And
some
I
really interesting.
that's the first time I've had a criticism about visual effects in the modern era. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. So
I I mean, I've heard like I've read some interesting sort of criticism where they're talking about that this is kind of an evidence where people have been complaining
yeah,
for whatever for several years about the quality of special effects, but I think a lot of
but
that is the expectations are
also about
ridiculously
but
high.
again though, a lot of those complaints. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but some of them have come from the VFX employees
Exactly,
themselves, and
Yeah.
and and again, a lot of that comes from
we've had Billy
cost
and Barry
cutting.
on the show, and
Yeah.
they can
Oh yeah.
attest to that. Yeah,
I mean, a lot of it cost cutting, pushing something through a lot faster, not really, taking the time to see if it can, be developed or artistically rendered in a
yeah,
different way that's not going to look as weird. But I mean, we've had some very interesting VFX issues with,
yeah.
you know, movies that are not VFX heavy that have been relying a lot on CGI. That I think, some of the conversations I've been seeing is that this might be one of those tipping points where maybe, especially given some of the changes in strategy now with releases, and we'll talk about that in the news, but that this might give those shows and those groups, the people who are working on them, more time uh, to actually refine what's shown on screen.
Yeah.
And some things that are forgiving when you're at home on your TV are not so forgiving when you're on when you're looking at a massive screen or an IMAX screen. So I think that we're getting to that point where the expectations are now very high, but the technology and the ability is there that they should come close to meeting those expectations. And when it's not, it becomes obvious. And especially
Well,
for $100 million movie, you kind of want to see some of that
at the
improved
end
a
of
little
the
bit, but
day,
not too much that it's going to be like I can't watch this movie; it's unwatchable because of the
well,
effects are
at the
perfect.
end of the day, they set their own high watermark, right? Like not
Yeah.
every film is going to be in game. In game and the special effects in that were
Hmm.
astronomical and outstanding. But that was their tent pole of tent poles, right?
Yeah.
As far as what we have right now, like that was the culmination of a ton of stuff. So they poured money into it. Not every movie is going to have that budget for that, and we're not going to get the same thing. So, and I think people have to remember that too. Like Ant-Man and Quantumania is not going to look like and going to be or it be interpreted visually like those other like that was like
Hmm.
Endgame was. I want to shift gears though a little bit. So we're all comic book nerds, right? Like
Yeah.
we've
I'm not a
read
nerd.
these
Huh?
geek, yeah,
Yeah.
comic book geek, yeah. So
None of us are nerds.
yeah, true. But I'll claim geek.
Geek is
Um, so but we've read
For people.
stories and we've seen these characters in comics forever, and one of the cool things about superhero comics is the actual costume designs and the fashion of
Yes.
it, and we've seen some really cool costume designs and stuff and fashion in throughout the Marvel films. I actually like kind of disappointed in the lack. I mean, there's a little bit of evolution there in the Ant-Man designs and stuff, but I feel like they're all pretty like similar. Like I was
yeah.
really
Mm.
hoping we would see some like, especially with Janet Van Dyne, right? Like Janet Van Dyne is a fashionista. Like the Janet Van Dyne that I know and love, every like she doesn't like. There's
Yeah.
like one or two costumes that I think of, but like her costume changes a billion times.
One of my
Yeah.
favorite moments involving Wasp, she isn't even present, which is when Hank and Jocasta are going into her closet, and my
Yes,
God, how many clothes did she have?
but
Yeah,
not only her, right? Like it's
one of my
insane
favorite
because
parts. Yeah,
she's a fashionista, and so her costumes change constantly. Ant Man's do as well. I mean, we've had and
yeah.
we've
And
had
some are
Yellow Jacket.
and some are beautiful. I mean, the design for the Goliath, the blue and yellow. I mean, that's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Like
gorgeous
I'm gonna
design. Yellow Jacket
spoilers.
is an exquisite design. Yeah,
Yeah, like
I
spoilers.
would have liked to have seen some variations of those.
Hmm.
Yes,
Yeah, and this
I'm
likely was our last chance to get him.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. Like
Yeah,
I did feel like I want to see more of that because it ties also back into something that we mentioned earlier, which is the Pym family. And I spoke about this on my own podcast way back in the day when Ultron came out, right? Like Avengers Age of
Hmm.
Ultron came out. One of my favorite things in Marvel is the Pym family. I mean, I know everybody talks about the first family and the Fantastic Four and stuff like that, but the Pym family tree, if you're an Avengers fan, is a very important thing because you have not only Hank and Janet, you have got the connective tissue between all of the Ant Man and Wasp folks, but you also have Ultron, you have Vision, you have Scarlet Witch, you have Simon Williams, you have the Grim Reaper, you have all of the kids, you have like now you have Viv and everything, and so like the Hank Pym family tree is really cool conceptually and important to the Avengers legacy. And I really felt like they did not do that justice and they stripped out that possibility with Ultron, but they gave that to us here. And I was really hoping, okay, they're going to give us some Hank Pym legacy. So they're also going to give us some more of these characterizations of what the Wasp looks like and of Giant Man. We've already seen Yellow Jacket, but it's not the traditional Yellow Jacket. Like it's different. So I really was hoping that, but I am very happy that we're starting to see this Hank Pym family dynamic because that is very important to the conceptualization of the Avengers and some of the history of it. It's not going to play out the same way because it can't, but it's still really cool. So
Yeah.
I'm about it.
Well, when you're talking about the costumes and stuff, I was disappointed that we didn't get more variation in the design because we have three different people here who have costumes on.
Yeah.
The Wasp costume hasn't really changed much since the second film. Ant Man's hasn't really changed all that much since the first film, which is surprising. And then Cassie's looks exactly like
His.
Scott's,
Yeah.
except it's purple piping instead of red piping. And I was like, there's got to be something a little bit more because again, the helmet designs alone, when it comes to Ant Man, have changed so much between all of the different characters. I mean, let alone the Giant Man versus Ant Man kind of the Goliath, costumes and whatnot. But just with the Ant Man costumes alone, yes, you got the usual red and steel color, but the helmets change wildly from depending on who's drawing it and what era and which person's wearing the helmet.
yeah.
Yeah, I
We
was kind
got
of surprised to be.
And the
we got
Wasp wings as
47.
well. That's another important distinction.
Yeah.
We've had a
Yeah,
lot
The
of
Wasp.
variations on how the Wasp
Exactly.
wings look
I
like.
mean, she didn't have the Judy Jetson dress at all at any point in this movie or the last one,
As
but
long as they don't go with that like mid '90s Spider-Man where she actually looked like a wasp. Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that wasn't
Just
great.
retcon
We've
that.
gotten
Yeah,
we got 47 different versions of Iron Man though. Mix it up a
yeah,
little. Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I mean, there's
but
somebody's gonna be able to do that.
yeah. Especially for something that's already been mixed up.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Um,
but again, we're picking at nits here, and I really did like
yeah,
love this film. Like
it
I
was
really
super
did.
fun.
I wouldn't go to love, but I liked.
I
Yeah,
liked it.
that's probably
I
fair.
don't love it.
I wouldn't go to love, but I
I'm
liked.
half a martini in, so
Yeah.
I'm being more generous.
You know,
um, my final word on this will definitely be Jonathan Majors. Beautifully portrayed Kang. He's got that quiet, sinister, you know, uh, just way when he's first introduced, talking with Janet in the flashback, and he's so nice and kind of like this cuddly castaway until she sees his past, and he immediately in his face he does that, Janet, what's wrong? And he knows exactly in that moment that she's seen through his mask.
Yeah,
And just the way his cold delivery when he's talking with Scott and threatening to kill Cassie. It just
Yeah.
so much of it could have been seen as wooden or mechanical acting if it was done
Yeah.
by anybody else who didn't have that kind of quiet, sinister rage that Jonathan Majors can do so well.
Humanize
But
the hell out of him. Yeah.
absolutely,
And I did
but
think just a testimony to how good he was when he tells her that her timeline and her existence and her family would be spared. You
yeah,
believe him
Yep.
oh
100%.
yeah,
He's not lying.
yeah. He's not.
He's
He's
not
not a
lying.
monster. He's just evil, and he would be paying her back. He would owe her a
It's
debt.
so evil.
No, he points out how inconsequential they are to people who are
Yeah,
above it all. It's Ant-Man. Look, there's an analogy there like that you can draw every time. Do we really give a shit about knocking over an anthill as people? No. If we see it,
No.
we see an anthill, it's in your
mhm.
way. You might kick it over. Like, and we don't think about
I've
that.
never
There's
kicked over an anthill.
well, you're a better like fire.
I
I
walk
live
in,
in the
what
South.
does it take to walk around it?
I live in the South. Fuck fire ants. Fuck
Jeez.
them forever.
Well, the fire ants, if you kick over the anthill, they will fight back. They will. They
Yeah.
will find out where
Yeah,
you live. They will
but
follow
we
you
murder
home.
those.
Yeah.
There's poison for that.
Yes, true.
They're terrible
Uh,
pests. But
you're
we don't think about that. But for
what you're
somebody
talking
like
about is going to tie in very directly with something that I'll talk about a little bit later.
okay, so I'll keep it like lower level, but for a character like Kang, who has seen all of time, and this version who is not just time but also like space, which is
Mhm.
weird. Like, because I think of Kang as time, but it's very linear. But they just did that with the other thing, so I can see why they're not doing that again. But like, he sees all these variations. There's billions of things happening, and he's trying to like trim the rose bush, so to speak. These are inconsequential things to him. These are ants to him,
Yeah,
and I think that's a very
literally.
interesting parallel to humanize him because he doesn't see himself. I mean, he's done terrible things in the light of humanizing, like when you humanize his victims. But if they're just ants,
Mhm.
is it really that consequential?
Yeah.
It is. It
Which
is if you're the ant.
Well,
I
and
mean,
that's another reason why all of his foot soldiers are just faceless
yeah,
automatons. I mean, there's no personality there. He just sends them out to either die en masse or to kill en masse. There's really
because
nothing.
he's above it all. He's
Yeah,
he's a god who's been brought down to the ants level, and he's got to get out and go back to doing what he's doing. And you
yeah,
see,
and
like if you know the history of him, or if you know the comic book history of Immortus, which we'll again later, that's what's happening, right? Like
yeah.
so.
Well, and speaking of, that's again Jonathan Majors, and my husband said this to me afterwards because he's actually worked with Jonathan before. They went to UNC School of the Arts together, so and the kind of character that Jonathan always tends to play, not always, but a lot of times, is that sort of like, very, very emotional, quick to cry, quick to anger, just very, forceful person, very, very serious. But at the end of this film, when they're showing I guess the Council of Kangs, kind of like the Council of Ricks, if you're a Rick and Morty fan, he gets to be campy as fuck.
Yeah.
He gets to be wacky as fuck. He gets to be anything that he wants to be when he's portraying every one of those millions of different Kangs. You know that he got to do all sorts of crazy different reactions for each one. A lot of them had unique makeup, and then of course the big three. He's dressed as just fucking King Tut because
Yeah.
it's Robert Tut. He gets to have the whole headdress and everything, and and being Immortus, like with a Fu Manchu mustache and just being all. And then we're not really sure who the third one is. I guess
I know, and couldn't you give us the Scarlet Centaurian?
Yeah.
maybe he is the Scarlet Centaurian, but
But
just
that's a
purple.
beautiful design
It
too.
is. It
That's
really
that's like
is.
the one Kang design that I think is nice.
Well, and we didn't see any. I didn't see any Iron Lads anywhere, so maybe maybe
We'll
he'll
see.
show up in
We'll
some
see.
other way. But I love I love this villain. Kang in the comics couldn't give a shit. I'm not a Kang fan in the comics, but Jonathan Majors as Kang and the way that Kang is being portrayed and built up in the MCU, I'm excited for it. I was excited for it in Loki. I'm excited for it in Loki season 2, and I was excited for it here. So I can't wait to see what they do with him in the big lead up to the end of whatever phase 5 or 6.
It didn't reach that level for me.
I'm liking him.
Yeah.
I'm liking him.
It didn't reach that level for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So final thoughts. What, like, spinning out of this? What are, like, not in this movie, but because this is part of a larger thing? What spins out of this movie that has got you excited? Just real quick. I'm curious about that. I'll go
Looking
first since
to
I
I mean,
broke.
the selfish thing is Young Avengers.
That was going to be mine. Yep.
Yeah, the selfish thing, but you really don't. It's not like she's like on the phone talking with somebody that could be a later teammate. You didn't really have it. Just that basically just comes out of what we know about Cassie in the comics.
Well,
Um,
but we also we not only have Cassie, we also now, like, we've got Kate Bishop, we've got the
Mhm.
yeah,
possibility of Wiccan and Speed. So, like,
Yeah.
but
they're doing different things.
they haven't met yet.
But the same thing. Like, I remember having this exact same kind of, like, giddy will
Yeah,
they won't they feeling when we got Thor, when we got, like, when Iron Man came out, then we got Thor, and Hawkeye was in Thor, and then we
Mhm.
got the Captain. I was like, oh, they're gonna give me an Avengers movie. Like, I'm
yep.
watching these things and looking at all the different pieces they're setting up. I'm like, they're gonna give me a Young Avengers movie.
Yeah, I didn't really feel that there was any kind of signposts that really got me excited about something.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mm,
I
cool.
didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, if there were for you, let me know. But it wasn't. But I do have to say that was one good thing about this movie because I do think some of the really lesser Marvel cinematic universe films have basically been bridges from one
Mhm.
point to another. At least this was its own story.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, whether there were faults or not, you can't even say that about. I mean, like to me, like the worst examples of that are Dark World and Age of Ultron. They're basically served to get from point A to point
Yep.
B, and the middle's substandard. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I will say that. So I mean, I just come away with this saying, like we said, liked but not loved, and I still think you should. I still think people should see it. I do think people should see it in the movie theater if they can. Um, so
Cool.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
qualified enthusiasm. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Well, not terrible.
Yeah. Okay, so something we've done on the Comic Book Bears show, fair listeners, in the past is when we have had a particular movie, we've brought out some of the graphic novels or collected editions or sometimes single issues uh, related to the characters of said movie that we can recommend to you. And we've all made some picks here. What order do you want to go? Because I think it might part of it makes sense for me to go first, and part of it also makes sense for Caleb to go first,
Hmm.
just because of the point in time for certain
Yeah.
characters. So I'm going to go for Caleb first. Yep.
Ooh,
There you go.
flipping the script on me. I like it. So, all right. So, in setup for the show, like Bill said, he was like, "Hey, grab a book that connects to the movie in some way. It can be anything. It can be an Ant-Man book. It can be a Wasp book. It can be a Kang book. It can be, whatever and what have you." So I decided to do a little bit of all of the above, and I chose to talk about one of my favorite Avengers series ever. I really do love this series, and it's Avengers Forever. And this was written by the great Kurt Busiek, and drawn by the great and now unfortunately late Carlos Pacheco that we actually just recently lost. He passed away not too long ago, and this comes right in the middle of my personal favorite run of the Avengers, and it's my favorite run of the Avengers because it's the book that locked me in as a comics fan, right? And that's the Kurt Busiek and George Perez Avengers Volume 3 run. So I remember picking it up at Walden Books as a kid. It's the what grabbed me, and it's what made me a comic book fan. It's what made me a George Perez fan. I know a lot of people older than me, like the generation just prior for me, they're like, oh, Teen Titans, like that's and deservedly so. For me, it's the Avengers. It's what he would had. So I've got all the individual copies of this, but it was just easier for me to reach up and grab my Avengers Volume 3 omnibus off of my bookshelf, which actually has Avengers Forever in it.
Yeah.
And here's what's cool about this is, like I said, it's got all of these characters. It's an Avengers story but it's Kang centric. But it really does focus and feature Ant-Man uh, and Hank Pym in a couple different ways. So the book's been around forever. Chances are, if you're watching this show, you're enough of a comic book fan that you've read this before. So I won't belabor the point. Um, we have a situation, a scenario where all hell is breaking loose. And it really centers around and focuses on the character of Rick Jones, who, as a Hulk fan, anytime I get to see Rick Jones, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's amazing because that's where the Avengers came from. Like Rick Jones called for help when the Hulk was doing a rampage, and that's how the Avengers culminated and came together. So I love that. And what has happened is, in the grand scheme of things, Immortus, who is the oldest version of Kang, at least that we know of, he knows something. Like he knows a secret, and it all involves around Rick Jones and some type of energy that Rick Jones is permeated with. And essentially, he's got to kill Rick Jones. So Rick Jones, bitch. He's got to he's got to take out Rick Jones.
I've
But
got to get you a T-shirt that says that.
um, and so he sends out his assault squad to kill Rick Jones. But Kang, who is at odds with Immortus, who's essentially trying to prevent himself from becoming Immortus, isn't going to let this happen, and injects himself not as a hero. Like, he's never a hero, right? But he's at least on some level on the side of the Angels, if nothing else, to give a middle finger to Immortus, to stop them from killing Rick Jones. And to do this, he pulls the Avengers from different eras, quantum time travel kind of thing. And so what you end up with is you get the Captain America who had just had a spirit broken right before he became Nomad, right? Like, he realized that his government was corrupt and the flag that he stood for was actually, inherently wrong, like bad, standing for bad things at that particular time. So he's down on himself. You get Wasp, who's kind of this current version of Wasp, and one of my favorite versions of Wasp, who very self-assured, quick to jump in a battle, an extremely good and extremely efficient leader of the Avengers. You get her version of Goliath, Hank Pym, from her particular time, who's her husband, but who knows all of his Hank Pym sins of the past and isn't really sure how to, like, he's kind of down on himself. You also have Yellow Jacket, who is the Hank Pym version of Yellow Jacket, who's in the middle of that psychotic break where he becomes just he's a hothead. He's not who we know. You've got Hawkeye, who is he's still Hawkeye. Like, he's always going to be Hawkeye, but he's from the early version, or the earlier version, where he's gone through a little bit of some shit, and like, he's given up his trick arrows. He got superpowers for a little bit, but now he got depowered. It doesn't feel exactly like the West Coast Avengers Hawkeye, but he's still in there somewhere. You got a few other characters. You've got Songbird, who Janet knows is a villain, but apparently somewhere in the timeline it becomes a hero, according to her. So all of these characters get thrown into the mix. They've got to figure out how to make it work as a team, and they've got to be able to kind of fight with not only Kang, but also with this other character who known as Libra, who's former villain, another former villain. So lots of trust issues in one story.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
He's sort of a villain.
yeah, he is, and
Sort of, yeah. I mean, just by virtue of being a member of Zodiac,
right,
he is. But he's a really interesting character that,
he
that I
is,
think is
and
underused in Marvel because
that
there's a
well,
lot of
they
stuff
lay
that
out.
links to him. Yeah.
They lay out some really cool things with him. They're like, yeah, he was a villain, and then he realized he wanted to be a student of history, and so, like, he broke out of jail, but he also just did it to go to, like, classes. So, like, he just I broke out of prison, I committed some crimes, but I was, like, in community college while it happened. I just wanted to know what was going on. So it's a really interesting character, and these characters in Kurt Busiek's hands, he really does show you the differences in Kang and Kang's personality. And it goes all the way from, like we said, Ramatut to Kang to Immortus, and how they're at odds with one another. they show you the best that these characters can be and the worst that they can be. Um, I chose this story in particular to talk about because I love the way that Janet Van Dyne is portrayed in the story. This is my favorite version of her. Um, she's not quite the Ultimates version of her, but she's still like she is extremely assertive. She is self-assured. She knows how to lead a team. She's a fashionista. She's bad. She's saucy. She's badass, but she loves her friends and she's able to inspire. There's like the best Captain America aspects when he's leading the team. She emulates that, and I think that's very important. I think that's very important to her character. She is completely in love with Hank, but she also knows their rocky history. She has not forgotten, but she's forgiven, and to be able to deal with what's happening and the trust issues that go in like battling anything with Kang and Immortus being involved, fighting off these hordes. I mean, just billions of things that Immortus throws, people that Immortus throws at them throughout history. Um, it's a very dynamic book, and it's both action packed and very character driven. I love it. Like this is the event. Like this is peak Avengers. There's other stories I like better. I'm not saying this is like the prime like Avengers story. This is good Avengers though, and it's one of the reasons I love Kurt Busiek.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can ever get somebody to read the Busiek Perez Avengers and what transpires after it,
Yeah.
Busiek surely didn't jump the shark after George left um, on that series. There's wonderful moments. I just remember in that run, there's the Nuff Said issue, which is
Yep.
Kang based, which is really great, and it's a great Wasp issue too,
Yes, it
because
is.
she's effectively the leader at that time. Yeah.
You get the we would have Ultron. We would have words with the moment
Yep.
in that series too.
Hmm.
Um, it's my favorite run, and again, part of that's nostalgia, but part of that's because I love these characters and I love the designs, and
Yeah.
it's George Perez.
Yeah.
So
I love that entire run. I have to
yeah,
say, I love but just going outside of the creators we've mentioned, that this was a series that led up to Disassembled,
yep,
and even a writer I don't like Chuck Austin, and I don't
hmm
like Chuck Austin. He's not bad in that
he
series.
had good moments.
The Lionheart introduction, the reintroduction to the Invaders. What they gave him to do, he actually accomplished pretty good. Most of his other stuff is shit, but
Hmm
he's really good in this. The John stuff, and really fleshing out characters like Scott Lang, and particularly Jack of Hearts. That really
Yes,
were pretty one dimensional.
Black
But
Knight.
and She-Hulk.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, just really, really good stuff. That entire run, and also, whatever you think of Bendis, he wrapped that series up in a
very well.
very distinctive way, and which gave it some more validity than I think it otherwise would have had if it just had last issue on it.
Right.
Yeah, so I
Me,
really like that entire run.
to
That
me, the
entire run.
best, the best character development out of that run actually comes from Simon Williams. Like and Scarlet Witch, I mean too, but like Simon Williams especially in that run, just
Yeah,
watching him morph and see all the things he goes through. But
yeah,
real quick before we go on to another one, one of the things that this book, with having the dynamic of Hank Pym and Hank Pym both in it, really does point out the history of that character and the different versions of himself. And I wanted to point out another book that I have because there's a reference in here that directly ties into this book, and it's Avengers number 29 from the 60s. And in this series, it's basically Hank Pym like exhausted himself while he was shrinking down, and he has to stay 10 foot tall. And shenanigans ensue, and they have to go fight some bad guys. And Swordsman's in it. It's very Hawkeye driven um, to do stuff though, but you really start to see like um, the different version of Wasp in this, who's all really like a damsel in distress. It really shows you some very, when there's some sexist depiction that we would call now sexist depictions of female heroes, both Scarlet Witch and Wasp in this, but being kind of the damsels in distress and the quick to faint kind of situation, that kind of thing. But they show you the different versions of these characters and how they've grown throughout history. So I adore it, and I think it's a good reference point to you really focusing and figuring out, hey, Hank has got some internal issues with himself, and some, to really push the pun, some personal growth there.
Yeah.
So
Now you were holding that. Is that a facsimile, or do you actually have an Avengers
no,
one?
that's the original.
That's the original.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
my OG. Yep.
Okay. Cool.
I don't have a full run of the Avengers. Obviously, I'm not a millionaire. But no, this is a first printing, 12 cent, uh,
Nice.
Comics Code approved Avengers number 29.
Yeah. I think
I
my
went.
earliest issue of Avengers is 15, but
I have
it l-
Avengers
it looks a little
12.
janky. Yeah.
I have early double digit, one early double digits. After, obviously, I think it's after Cap comes back, but someday I want to finish my Hulk run. I've got an entire run of Volume 2. I've got 75% of Volume 1 taken care of. I've got a ton of Tales to Astonish, but if I ever get stupid money, I'll complete my Hulk run, and then I'll start working on the Avengers.
All right. There you go. Okay. Well, you mentioned the various Hank Pyms, so I think that's a good bridge into what I'm going to talk about. Let me just fire up the pad here because this is how I have this. And Steve, if you can pull up the graphic, but I'll show you guys here. Um, One of the best things about Christmas time and Comixology is they have really deep discounts on Masterworks and really deep discounts on Epic Collections. And that was how I picked this up. I have most of the original issues that are in here after a point. I don't have the Marvel feature issues with Ant-Man, but I do have the Black Goliath run. I do have the two original Marvel premiere issues with Ant-Man, and also the appearances of the champions with Black Goliath. And this is a nice way to bridge into that particular character because he's part of the Pym family. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, if you like Bill Foster as a character, the Marvel Cinematic Universe wasn't your friend. But we can go through what is in this, and you can see that there's various issues here. The first two volumes of Ant Man Giant Man from Marvel Masterworks reprint the entirety of his original run in Tales to Astonish. There's some other materials. The Wasp had like 5-page backups at points, so that stuff's all in there. And where we start out with is effectively with Marvel Feature. The first feature in Marvel Feature was the Defenders, which very quickly graduated to its own book, and this was taken over by Ant-Man. This was a point where Marvel had a big expansion of titles, so they were throwing everything against the wall to see if it would stick. And they tried again with Ant-Man. At the time, Hank Pym was Yellow Jacket, but pretty much semi kind of retired, and
Mhm.
they put him into a series of adventures. He did have a modified version of his costume when there were for a point he shrunk and could not get back to normal size. So that was an interesting aspect. Um, if you if I can make a DC Comics analogy, it was kind of like Sword of the Atom before that happened, but just with an urban setting um, instead of the weird jungle that was in the Sword of the Atom. So they're really kind of pedestrian Bronze Age stories that are part of that run of Ant-Man. Really terrible, terrible, forgettable villains that were created, like Paraman and Doctor Nebula. I mean, they're terrible. Which is also a shame because there are some fairly decent Pym villains, Egghead and Ultron being certainly the most prominent. There's also some duds like the Porcupine. And the MCU treatment of him has basically been has basically been aligned like that. So you do have a run of Ant-Man. Um, I just wanted to show Steve, if you can show this other picture, which was something really nice in this Masterworks, is they do have contributions by some of the original writers like Mike Friedrich and Tony Isabella that wrote some of these stories. And there was a last minute decision to change the last Ant-Man story in Marvel feature. so that it would like more effectively lead into him and Janet rejoining Avengers if they needed to, and recapping what went before. It was actually very confusing, but unfortunately, this beautiful page got jettisoned. This is by P. Craig Russell. There were a number of artists that were contributing through the run,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, basically where they were at this point was a lot of people thought that Hank and Janet were dead because of a fire that happened at their lab, and that runs through the entire Ant-Man run in Marvel feature. But this was a point where they find out he's alive. He basically, and you can see somewhat of his little stitched, slightly different Ant-Man costume there, and they're happy to see him. And it's just a wonderful little nugget, and would have been a great last page given where the original story was headed. And Mike Friedrich even says like he can't even remember what exactly was the problem with this, but it was such a shame that they had to jettison this page. But thank God it survives because it's beautiful.
Yeah,
So happy to see that.
Yeah, I do like this. I mean, just it's just fun. That first panel is kind of silly, but also I just like the dynamism of it. And then of course, just everybody, all the Avengers, so excited to see him. This
Yeah,
little tiny
and
dude with
also
a sword.
Hank, there's been times in the Avengers where Hank hasn't exactly been celebrated.
Well,
So,
right.
yeah.
and justifiably so. So seeing a moment like this is just nice to see.
So
Uh,
do we?
yep, go ahead.
One question and one comment. Really, do we know whose hand that is? Is that Wonder
That's
Man's hand?
Thor's. That's
Thor's
Thor.
hand. Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Um, when you first showed this, I did not see the by P. Craig Russell up at the top. I actually thought this was a Max Fuimera just because of the Iron Man
Mhm.
design.
Yeah.
It's like it does not scream P. Craig Russell to me, like
No.
at least the P. Craig
Mm-mm.
Russell that I know.
No. If you look at some of his earlier work, and as I was saying before we got on, Killraven is a really good example of this.
Hmm.
Where he's at the beginning at Killraven and where he is at the end, you see the evolution of his style. And this was a point where he was kind of more along the lines of trying to fit in with other artists like Herb Trimpe and Ross Andrew and other artists that were drawing Marvel superhero comics at the time. Gil Kane, you know, almost all the covers during the Marvel feature run of Ant-Man were Gil Kane.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a lot more conventional than most of his work, and but it has its own appeal. I really like it. In the Masterworks, we also move on to Black Goliath, which was a character that was initially appeared in the Avengers as Bill Foster as Hank Pym's assistant, and then eventually
Yep.
calling somebody Hank Pym's assistant means he probably has degrees out the waz, and
Right.
certainly that was the case with Bill Foster. It was interesting where they reintroduced him was in the pages of Power Man, not as a villain, but he was taking on the Goliath persona that Hank had abandoned. But as was the timber of the time, he was Black Goliath because he
Yep.
was an African American character. He
Very
was
very
also
important to the Civil War storyline.
very important to the Civil War story, but also important in this particular run of Power Man because he's the first superhero character who was divorced. So that's an interesting little take. And
Hmm.
at the time, Luke Cage is dating Bill Foster's ex, and of course, there's a misunderstanding. How else are you going to introduce a new character in the Bronze Age? Uh, but the character is popular enough to have a brief 5-issue run. He also appears later in the Champions. Doesn't join the team, but uh, given that he's based in Los Angeles, there is interaction among the other characters there. So you have those issues reprinted as well. And then lastly, we get to Scott Lang's first adventure as Ant Man. Scott Lang is also introduced first in the Avengers in a basically throwaway few panels where they introduce him as one of Stark International's security consultants. And he's there to like fix the door at Avengers Mansion. But the very next month, we have a new Ant Man, and that turns out to be Scott Lang. So there's a lot of a lot of threads that we see. We have the introduction of Cassie. We have the introduction of Darren Cross, slightly different version from Carrie Stoll, but you do see the threads that have basically defined the character, that he was a thief. Um, there's a lot more sensible motivation for him to leave that life in here. And there's also just a wonderful Bronze Age moment because it just couldn't happen anywhere at any other time. Let me put it that way. So, as we said, Ant Man is a thief. Scott Lang is a thief. He breaks into Hank Pym's house in Leonia, New Jersey. Sorry, no, that was the Wasp and the Scarlet Witch were in Leona, and Cresskill, New Jersey, same county I grew up in. So felt like home. And he steals one of the original Ant-Man outfits. He didn't know though that Hank, as Yellow Jacket, was actually watching him as this went by, and was kind of following him. And then in the high security facility, he got zapped by electrodes, and that's why we didn't see Hank, because he was shocked for a time. But he just gives Scott the outfit. He says, "Oh, you did pretty good. It's always good to have another hero around. Take it." There isn't any other time apart from the Bronze Age where you would have had dialogue in a development like that. So if you want to see the introductions of important characters, and again, Bill Foster, very much factored into the second Ant-Man film. You have their introductions in this Masterworks volume, Ant-Man, Giant Man, Volume 3. So I guess we can pass it on to Steve for a little more recent Scott Lang oriented adventure.
Recent-ish.
Ish.
So
Certainly not the
and
70s. Yeah.
no. So you know, well, I've talked about it on the show before. I didn't really get back into superhero comics until about 2011, and 2011 was a pretty big year for DC. But it was also a pretty big, 2011, 2012 was pretty big for Marvel as well. I mean, 2012 had the Avengers movie come out. The Ultimates were, the Ultimate Universe was starting to introduce a lot of a lot of new characters. Miles Morales, I think, came out just the year before. So, like, there was a lot of stuff that was going on. But one of the things that Marvel always, I think, does pretty well is they like to sort of mine the back catalog for less popular but very much well loved teams, and that was the Defenders. And they got a little plucky guy named Matt Fraction to write a maxi series, 12-issue maxi series of the Defenders. And the art on
Well,
the
it,
entire run was
Steve,
excellent.
I also had to say it was an ongoing. It just didn't sell.
Yeah, well,
It was
yeah.
an ongoing. It just didn't sell.
The story itself, the interesting thing about the story itself is that it does have that kind of connective thread where it has a beginning, middle, and end.
Yep.
And that even if it didn't sell, it at least had a plan
Yeah.
that
It has an arc. Yep.
that gave it a full
It has a
12
fully
issue arc that
realized arc. Yep.
works. And it was a great series. I decided to pick it up because I thought it was beautiful. It had covers by these people called the Dodsons, Terry and Rachel. I didn't really know them too well at that point, and just really fell in love with their artwork. But also the interiors were done very well. So you had the Dodsons doing interiors, but you also had, I believe, Jamie McKelvey was doing some interiors, and that's the one I'm going to talk about. That sort of the final 3-issue arc of this entire crazy Defender series. And of course, Defenders is generally pretty wild and insane. Every time that they bring them back, they pretty much do the weirdest or strangest or craziest adventures that don't really fit with the other big conglomerate teams. In this one, the entire giant arc that's happening here is that there are these strange squiggly sculptures called concordance engines that exist throughout throughout the multiverse, essentially, but primarily with Earth. And the Defenders team, which starts out as Silver Surfer, Doctor Strange, Red She-Hulk, Betty, and Iron Fist, they discover one of these engines and
Hey,
they steal it.
you're missing a big one there. Caleb's boy, Namor.
Well, Namor does make an appearance, but he disappears for quite a big chunk of the book.
Comes
So he's there
back.
for a few issues and then disappears again.
He's definitely a
Um,
number one.
Gets no
yeah, he's the
respect.
number
Gets no
one to number
respect.
3, and then he's gone until number 12. So,
He was
uh,
tied.
yeah, he had other things to do. He was ruling 75% of the world. So there you go. But they Doctor Strange steals one of these engines, finds out what power it has, basically the power to sort of make anything real, anything that a person desires to be real, makes it true, makes changes reality. Um, and the the engine itself, as well as the guardian of the engine, which is a Prester John, one of an infinite number of Prester Johns, um, basically decides that it's going to teach them a lesson and starts zapping them around the universe, or at least through different versions of the universe, different times, different periods in space. Where they encounter a Nick Fury in the swinging 60s, where Hitler never died and was turned into Franken Hitler, and all sorts of there's lots of go-go craziness. Agent Pussycat is in there, mucking stuff up. There's all sorts of wildness. But from that weird 60s timeline, they get transported again to something terrifying. And throughout the series, there have been little hints, mostly, words in the margin, like "everyone you love dies," "stop the engines," "everything's going to end," "it's all going to be destroyed." All these are kind of like just little phrases that are popping up in the margins of every page. Um, and in this issue, the heroes find themselves in what appears to be some devastated, post-apocalyptic city, where they're scrounging for food, but they've also been shrunk to the size of insects. And of course, when you have this kind of situation where you're shrunk to the size of insects, it's just a matter of time before Ant-Man shows up. And Ant-Man in this version of Ant-Man, which is technically supposedly, the 616 version of Ant-Man, Scott Lang, he's the last Avenger. In this timeline, in this situation, the entirety of the world has been destroyed. All the other Avengers have been murdered by a death celestial, which is the whole reason why the concordance engines exist, to stop the death sent um, the death celestials from destroying reality. And unfortunately, because of the mistake the defenders made, a death celestial has been called, has arrived on Earth, and has decimated humanity, life, everything, and killed all the Avengers, except for Scott Lang, who has stayed safe because he's the size of an ant. The Death Celestial just doesn't care about anything that small. It's meaningless. It's beneath it. There's really nothing there. And so he's been able to survive. He's been able to help people.
He's like Caleb with an anthill.
Yes, exactly. So the
Exactly.
Death Celestial is the Kang in the situation, who's just basically ignoring little Scott Lang, who's the last Avenger. He is the last one alive to, and before the Defenders show up, thinks that this is pretty much it. Like, there's really nothing he can do but help people survive just a little bit longer by shrinking them down to his size. But it turns out, and they expressly do say it, that within this world of the Defenders, what everything has happened is, has happened up to this point, is leading them all together. Scott Lang plays a role, and his role here is to keep the Avengers, or keep these Defenders safe, and to allow them the time to figure out the next step, which is to get to the concordance engines everywhere else before the Death Celestial can destroy them. And this in this issue, and then of course in the final issue, and here's another beautiful picture here by the Dodsons, where they very cleverly sign their name in the odd runes that are flying around. He does have that ability to help them out. These are titans. These the Defenders themselves. You've got a cosmic editor. You've got Silver Surfer. You've got the almost immortal personification of rage, which is Red She-Hulk here. You've got Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme at the time in 2012. And you've also got Iron Fist, which, Danny Rand. And a weird swinging 60s Nick Fury. But here's Ant-Man. And of course Namor does show up in in the final act as well. And I think those are his pants that you can kind of see at the top of the
They
screen
are.
if you're watching. He does have
I
a really
wouldn't
kick-ass
crouch
beard.
anywhere.
Yeah, he's got a kick-ass beard in this one too. Longish hair, really awesome beard with like white streaks in it. So, but yeah, it really here Ant-Man, he saves them. He plays an integral role in creating the situation to allow them that much more time to basically stop the engines and save the universe, and in doing so, stop themselves from stealing the engine in the first place and setting everything right. This whole series is really great. As Bill said, it could have been an even longer ongoing, but it didn't have the sales. This 12-issue series, it's a full story.
Yep.
So I totally recommend it.
If you could just go back to full screen, I just want to
sure.
show you. This also shows here for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to see here, but I have Defenders issue 1 and then 7 through 12. So this was definitely at the beginning of the digital age where they provided the codes, because I have a bunch of series that are like this. I'm sure they had number 1 as a giveaway and then had the others from codes. Just one thing I just think you should mention, Steve, is I really love this series. Um, though it's
Oh yeah.
pretty bleak what the template is, what goes on
Mhm.
here, it's also a lot of fun, and there's some really funny dialogue in here.
Oh,
Particularly,
absolutely.
particularly his take on Black Cat is just beautiful,
Yes.
beautiful.
Felicia in this is a lot of fun. She shows up and is a focal point in issue number 7, mostly, where
Yeah,
she has to steal a devil's claw.
yeah,
It's just a lot of fun. The whole team that's put together here by Fraction, I think, is just wonderful.
yeah.
The artists contributing to this series, I mean, there's several of them. Obviously, you have the Dodsons. You've got McElvey. You've got
You're away from the mic.
Lark.
Please get to the mic.
You've got Lark. You've got Fraction. You've got McElvey. You've got a bunch of other people who are just really giving a beautiful take on this series, and of course the
And just
Dodsons handling
the
each of
whole
the.
issue of that anybody can be a defender, and
Yeah.
Yes,
it's a non-team for the time that it's
It's not a
together.
team. It's
Yeah,
not a team.
it's not a team.
This
It's a
plays
bunch
up
of
on this beautifully. Yeah,
bunch of people, and of course this series also introduces a lot of the concepts of like the the conquerors of the curious, like these weird secret super teams that have existed in the golden age and the Victorian age and all of that in Marvel.
Well, and talking about setting up concepts, this book came out before the Man on the Wall concept came
Mhm.
out, but
Yep.
I think it plays really well into that.
Mhm.
That's something
Absolutely.
after the fact, like having read, what they did with that particular run of the Avengers, or leading up to that, and what they did with Nick Fury and establishing him as the quote unquote man on the wall.
Mhm.
You read that and then you go back and read this and you see those seeds there. So Fraction
Oh
did
yeah.
a really, like, I am certain that Aaron was playing off of something. I don't know that for a fact, but I would bet, were I a betting person, that he's playing off a
Well,
lot of what he did here, because it really does establish him as that. Like, this is the man on the wall.
yeah, and the great thing with Scott Lang's use in here is that he's not a major character, but that's the thing with the Defenders. They bring in people that just serve an absolute purpose, and obviously it's comics, so the comic writers like who's going to be perfect here, and Fraction picks a good one. Fraction
Yeah.
picks somebody who can actually really make a difference in this extremely bleak future set of events, but really save the day and allow these ultra powerful characters to be able to do what they need to do. And ultimately it's the easiest thing to do, and that's Doctor Strange just has to stop himself from doing something stupid. He goes home instead of following the Hulk in issue number 1. That's the change, is that he goes home, and he also apologizes for his behavior, sleeping with a grad student. Something very simple, but Ant-Man saves the day in that issue to make sure that they actually have the ability to do so.
Okay. All right. So those are some of our choices for supplemental reading. should you choose the assignment in the curriculum of additional Pim Lang Kang, the Pim Lang
Pim
Kang,
Lang Kang.
the
Pim Lang
Pim Lang
Kang.
It's
Kang.
like Old Lang Syne. It's Pim
Yeah.
Lang Kang.
Yes.
So
May old acquaintance be for shrunk?
okay, so we probably can go another half hour here.
Yeah.
So we have some books to talk about. We have a little bit of news to talk about. I think we can get it all in. So let's
I
give it a
think so.
shot. Okay, so let's go over let's go over to news. That was deliberately for the audio version. Let's go over to news. Let's go over to
News.
news. Let's go over to
We don't have a lot.
let's go over to news. Okay.
Awesome. Let's go over to news. Okay, so we've got news. We don't have a lot of news. I'd say that this is the past couple of weeks have been kind of light on news. However,
And you just watch. We're gonna dump the news segment, and the next episode there's gonna be 7 major developments in the industry. So
that's
it's
what
staying. It's staying.
that's what I'm saying too. Because this week, right now, as we're recording, it's the 23rd. This weekend, starting today, I guess, is Comics Pro, where they've already started, throwing out a bunch of announcements from the Big Two and from Boom Studios and IDW. So I think in 2 weeks we're going to have a lot of news on new stuff that's going on. But one of the things that's come up that's kind of independent of Comics Pro that was announced around the time the past couple of days is the return of the Ultimate Universe, or at least sort of. Hickman and Bendis are getting back together again to write. What do you mean, no?
Hickman and Hitch.
Hickman and Hitch. Wwhy am I thinking Bendis? Hickman
Because
and Hitch.
Bendis
Brian Hitch.
you more
Brian
closely
Bendis,
associate
Brian
with
Hitch.
the Ultimate Universe than anybody else.
That's
why
I've
I
got
think
it. I got it stuck in my head with Brian, and then of course Brian Bendis. But Brian Hitch and Hickman are getting together to tell a story concerning 2 major figures from the Ultimate Universe. One of them is Miles Morales, but also most importantly in this is the Maker with the silly head, silly helmet. Very evil Reed Richards is kind of the catalyst here to sort of bring I'd say some of the menace that he had in the Ultimate Universe, but now of course he's in the main universe. So we're not too sure. There's not a lot of details on this. We do know that the Illuminati somehow factor in. That's the sort of super group comprised of the smartest people on the planet. Somehow are involved in this, and of course the Avengers are going to be involved in this. And Miles Morales somehow is the key with the Maker. They've released some art on this that's actually pretty awesome, pretty beautiful. Kind of showing a few images of what we can expect, what kind of characters might be involved. We can see a little Wasp right down there in the bottom if you're watching this with us.
Who is the ultimate Wasp? Like that's Wasp
is
from the Ultimate Universe.
Yeah. Same thing with the. It looks like the Ultimate Avengers, specifically those designs. Thor up there, or the Ultimates.
There was
Not Ultimate Avengers, the Ultimates. But you also have the Illuminati on the right-hand side of the screen there, with the Miles Morales right there in the center, led by the Maker, which is very interesting. So we're not really sure exactly whether the Maker is going to be kind of benevolent here. Probably not. He's going to be evil, has an evil plan, I'm sure. But very interesting, very intriguing. And that is coming, is that later this year, I think. I want to say in the third quarter.
I just had the article up.
Regardless of when it comes out, like I'm looking forward to this. I think it's interesting that Hickman destroyed all of this, and he's like, wait a minute, let's circle back around. But also, I'm unapologetically a fan of Brian Hitch. I hope he can stay on schedule. He catches a lot of flack, but like you go back and look, like the last thing I ever remember seeing him in was the Hawkman stuff that he did with Robert Venditti, and I think that's beautiful.
Oh my god, that was that Hawkman run is one of my favorite DC books.
He's slow, but he packs the panels full.
Yeah, just don't release it till he's finished.
Till he's done.
Really, that's it's very simple.
Very much so.
That's
But
yeah.
this is going to be really cool. I know that a lot of people are probably looking forward to this. If you were a fan of the Ultimate Universe and were really sad when they
Yeah.
got rid of it 10 years ago now, I think it's been about 10 years since it was destroyed.
When was the Battle World?
Secret,
That was Ultimate
uh,
End.
Ultimate End, I want to say was 2013 or 2014 because
No,
Secret
it was
Wars
later than
2.
that. No, no,
What?
it
No,
was tied into Civil War, wasn't it? Or
no, it came out before that.
when was Battle Secret War? Secret
Secret
War.
War 2. Secret Wars
Secret
was
War 2.
2015.
Yeah, it was with that. That was when you
Mm,
had yeah, absolutely. Pinky bet on this one. I am absolutely certain about
No,
this one.
I agree with you. The Ultimate Universe was part of that, but it was destroyed leading up to uh, Secret Wars 2. So it was before
And
that
part
they
of the
were already
convergence.
ending all of the books.
Yeah, it was part of the convergence stuff. Whenever they were,
Hmm.
that was
It
when,
was Ultimate that one you had Battle Worlds and all that
yeah.
shit. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it
and that
was
came
the
out
end of
afterwards.
Yeah. That's
Hickman's
Ultimate End.
Avengers.
And Bendis
Yeah,
wrote the end. I mean,
Hmm.
Hickman pulled the strings, but Ultimate End is actually written by Bendis,
right.
who should be the
Yeah.
one to put the final word on the Ultimate Universe.
Mm.
Yep. And this
But
was also the
yeah,
first time online I saw some Hickman hate, some Hitch hate.
really,
I've
He
seen
does
I've
this.
seen it before. He's slow.
He does this.
People complain.
Yeah, but
yeah.
that's like so. Then you got other issues if
Yeah,
that's your complaint. You got other issues if God forbid, these people had to deal with Doomsday Clock. Jesus,
right.
you know,
None of
like
these people who are reading this
you've
are going to read
never
that.
heard of
But
delays in comics before, really? Jesus.
jeez.
I, like I said,
Mm,
I'm an unapologetic fan.
Yeah.
I love when he does. I like Bernie.
Nobody does widescreen comics better.
mhm.
Even his, what was the Ultron book that he did way back in the, like, it was like a graphic novel, Ultron Unleashed or something. It wasn't great. Like, the story was terrible, but it looked good. They even made a coloring book out of it, and I bought it. So
Yeah, and he had that. There was that JLA series that he wrote
Yes.
too,
yeah,
which was
That speaking of delays, that one had a lot of delays to it.
yeah,
And I think got canceled prematurely just because it took a while to come out.
yeah.
Only got so many
And what
issues.
else
But
do you have there in terms of the
yeah,
news there, Steve?
really quick, with with both of the cinematic universes, they had some interesting announcements in the past couple of weeks. So of course, the Flash film is still coming out. It is coming out June 16th. However, DC and WB announced that it is actually going to be premiering it 2 months earlier than the public release at CinemaCon in April. So I guess April
What
24th,
the hell is
25th in Vegas.
CinemaCon in Vegas?
CinemaCon, it's for, it's mostly for professionals and I guess people who go to
All right.
conventions about movies. Yeah, not too familiar with it, but apparently they are going to get the first
Okay.
full release of this film.
it's
And then
it's it's where the popcorn whisperer holds court every year.
must be. It's actually just him. He is CinemaCon.
The
it's
Popcorn
his it,
Whisperer is part time,
time.
as he's
Uh,
part time at the movie theater now.
oh no, no more revelations.
Yeah.
No more secrets from the snacks.
Yeah. Well, he did have to wait online like everybody else to get the Ant-Man popcorn holder. He was very happy he
Yeah,
got a $40 head. I don't know
yeah,
how you characterize it.
overpriced bucket that you can only use once. Um, but the other announcement that came out, and this is more something that's been kind of brewing the past couple of weeks, is that Disney is kind of rethinking its release strategy with the Marvel, with the MCU properties. So one of the big things that they did is they moved out the release of Marvels from July all the way down to November. This is it's a pretty good move. It's a pretty sure bet for them because this makes it a more holiday uh, time frame movie, which has been pretty successful for them in the past. I mean, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever came out last year about this time, so it's definitely a good move. But this also means that we're only getting two more MCU TV series this year as well, because adjusting the release date for the films also adjusts the release date for the shows. So we're definitely getting Secret Invasion and Loki season 2, but that's it. Everything else has been pushed out until next year. Even the ones that have pretty much finished filming
Which is all of
And
them,
then
except for
yeah, which
Daredevil.
is pretty much all of them. And then some other ones that have been announced already are probably going to be pushed out a little bit further as well.
Since it's a little off the path of this, is What If in that bundle too?
What If has been pushed to next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but that, you know what? Hey, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and maybe having less, we're not going to be as overwhelmed, I think, by releases.
We're
I know a lot of people were kind of complaining about the fatigue from this, but whatever. I'm
I
just
hate
happy to get
people.
them.
I hate
So
people. Shut up. Just
not.
no, seriously, shut the fuck up. Because the best I had growing up was 2 hours on CBS of Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk, and you have an abundance of riches in
Yeah.
front of you. Shut the
yeah,
fuck up. If it's such an issue, then just bank it and watch it later if you don't have
Yeah.
the time.
Stream it.
It's
Stream it
never
later.
been easier to do that either. Oh,
mhm.
So
people suck.
so not complaining because we have because of the overabundance, but I was gonna say we're not lacking for any good things to watch. Like I love the richness of what we like for the overlap between cinema and comic book nerddom. I love the
Yes.
richness and the depth that we have. So moving things back, two more series. We're not lacking for good television right now. So
No.
like it's I want to say that, but I'm not complaining because fatigue or what. Like no, the more the merrier. I'll watch what I can
Exactly.
get, but there's a lot of good stuff on TV right now. So we have an overabundance of great things to watch. I'm happy. I'm happily satisfied with what we have.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the complaint about the overabundance of riches is a little
I
too
have
much. But
superhero fatigue. Shut up.
Oh, I just
but at
finished
this
this,
point,
and
and
now there's
also
another one premiering in 2 weeks. Like, get a problem, really.
we
I've
yeah.
got a few in my back pocket. I'd gladly pass on to you.
Well, and the other thing too, we talked about it earlier with Quantumania. Maybe this will give those VFX houses more time to coordinate and take their
Yeah.
time and improve on some of the stuff.
Well, also, it's also important to note that Disney has been actively changing their policy, and they're going to build their
Yes.
internal VFX groups up more so that they're not in this particular situation. All right. So that's it for news, right? We don't have
Yeah,
anything
that's
else.
it.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
there's nothing else. Yeah.
So we all have books to talk about, but we got to go through these pretty quickly. So let's do it. I'll go first because I'm the best at abbreviating. I proudly say, because I'm always forced to do it as I've been in the pole position very often in this. So the first book we're going to talk about is my choice, and I was mistaken because I thought we didn't talk about DC on the last two shows, but it was actually the last show. And the reason I got confused, and this is a pitch here. Um, Caleb, if you can just briefly tell people about the podcast that yourself and myself guested on.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So Bill and I had the opportunity to go on some mutual friends of ours. They have a podcast now, very very much in the same vein of ours. They talk about comics that they love, a lot of contemporary comics, but they also dive back into older stuff. It's called Comics Discourse 114, and this is made up a group of it's Brian Newberry, Brian Clark, and Haas Anthology. We've known these folks for years. They are friends that we know through the 11 o'clock comics podcast thing. Brian is who I go when I go to Nashville and stay with. He's my con buddy, who's who I room with at Heroes every year. Dear, dear friend. All of these people, I literally have Hassan's head on a stick. Hang on. I wasn't planning on doing this. I have Hassan head. There's a backstory to this. There's a reason I have my friend's head on a stick. Um, but we were able to go on their podcast to chit chat about some recent comics that we've read and that we really enjoyed. Um, one of which was a queer themed comic. The other one was just some Scarlet Witch awesomeness. Very happy to talk about those. So thank you for their hospitality. And it is available on. I listen to it on Spotify. I think it's available all the ways. Go check out Comics Discourse 114.
And if you're wondering why Steve wasn't there, Steve was actually seeing Quantumania as we were
Yes.
Yep.
recording. So there you go. Okay, so my book. So this is a DC book, but wouldn't have necessarily chosen a DC book, but I got things wrong. And the one I'm going to talk about is Blue Beetle Graduation Day. Steve, I think you do have a graphic to get this a little clearer. There you go. And there are I think 4 issues out. I have 3 of them so far, and again, it's Jaime's graduation day. One really interesting thing about this is it's a completely Latino creative team. The book is written by Josh Trujillo, and it's drawn by Adrian Gutierrez. The colorist is Will Katana. Lucas Gattoni is the letterer, and there are variant covers by Rafael Albuquerque, David Marquez, Alejandro Sanchez, Ivan Pleskia, and these are all Latino creators. So um, there have been Latino creators involved in Jaime in the past, naturally being a Latino character, but I think this is the first time we've had the full gamut in terms of pencil to execution. Um, so where are we in graduation day? Yes, Jaime is graduating high school, but that's not all that's going on. Uh, he's in a situation right now because he is a little bit behind. He did graduate on time, but unfortunately, um, he didn't get it together enough to put in his college applications. So he's graduating, but he doesn't have any plans for college right now. His friends Paco and Brenda do, and he's a little bit down about that. But um, his parents lay down the law and they say, you've got to start becoming a man. So he's going to be working in a restaurant that's owned by his tias. And now this is a great twist here. His tias are his natural aunt and also the aunt's wife. So you have some LGBT representation in there. So that's nice to see. And this is full of guest stars. Now, what's going on here is the Reach, which created the scarab that connects with Jaime to become Blue Beetle, are sending out signals, and it looks like they're preparing for an invasion. But they don't know exactly what's happening because nobody can really translate Reach apart from uh, I forget what his name is. They actually gave the scarab a name, but um, I could look for it, but it's not worth it for the time. But something's going wrong, and he's not necessarily translating correctly. So they have a graduation party for Jaime. There's a special guest there. It's Superman. He's there first to congratulate Jaime on graduating, second to thank him for helping with the recent Dark Crisis event, but also to tell him he's grounded. We don't know what's going on, and because of how powerful the Scarab is, you can't become Blue Beetle. Jaime, you know, uh, uh, you know, he understands this, but he's not exactly happy about it. But just as this happens, there's a yellow beetle that appears in where was it? Was it in El Salvador? El Salvador. Yeah, I got it right. And through the course, you'll see the yellow beetle there. There's also a green beetle that makes an appearance, and it turns out that these are characters that um, are not necessarily created by the Reach, but an offshoot from the Reach who were peaceful that have become known as the Horizon that have a connection to Tamarin. So we have Starfire in here as well. And it's not a Blue Beetle book without Ted Cord, and it's a wonderful take on Ted Cord that they have in here. And also, Ted Cord's sister plays into this. There's a lot of stuff in the mix, but it's all working. And another really nice another really nice twist in here is there's Spanish language pages, but there's no translation. So you got to do some work if you don't know Spanish. Luckily, I can still read it enough to get the basic understanding between taking Spanish all through junior high and high school and also taking Latin. So I'm in a situation where I can read, but I can't necessarily speak. Same with French, some degree, some other Romance languages. But really, really fun take on Jaime. Uh, really valuable series. I think it's scheduled for 6 issues. Given that there's a film coming out, I wouldn't be surprised if you do see something announced subsequent to this. And I hope it's this team because you can feel the love that they have for this character. So, Blue Beetle graduation day. That's what I got.
Steve, why don't you go next? Because I can be really brief on mine.
Oh, okay. So everybody knows that I have really gotten into like horror comics recently, especially a lot of these one shots that are kind of coming out from a lot of different publishers. Boom, Aftershock, Image has been throwing a lot of these out there. All oversized, all a pain in the butt to store, but they all look very cool in the prestige format that they're in. And the latest one here is A Foulness in the Walls, which is an Aftershock release, especially coming after their recent bankruptcy, and big cutting back of their stable of books.
Very,
Um,
very quick question, Steve. I was messing with the thing. Is this
Sure.
oversized?
it is
Okay.
oversized. It
All right.
is
That nicely
very
ties into
large.
something else. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a beautiful book, beautiful binding. I think it's really good quality. But then again, everything that I've seen recently between Marvel's Black Label oversized prestige format and Aftershock and Boom, and everybody's been really doing a great job here. This one is a one and done. It's by Cullen Bunn, of course. He's written a lot of dark horror and thriller books over the years. All of them have been excellent. I don't think I've read anything that I didn't like of his. And the art here is by Rodriguez Zayas. He has a great style, very sinister without really overshowing a lot. And this one, it very simple premise. This gentleman George has been basically his life has been on hold. He's been taking care of his elderly, infirm mother in the old age home where she's been pretty much stuck for the past, I don't know, 5-10 years. She dies. He gets a little bit of money that he uses to buy a pretty big fixer-upper kind of house. The place is trashed. He moves in with his friend Darby, and Darby's like, "This place is a dump. You're going to put more money into this than it's worth." But George is just happy. He has a place of his own for the first time ever in his life, where he's not tethered to his mother. And he's having some issues, a lot of personal issues. The house, for some reason, smells bad, and he's not really sure why. He's trying to build his life back. He meets this really great woman, Cheryl. But all throughout this, the house just kind of gives off this constant odor that becomes more and more powerful, and it just makes him sick. You're really not sure exactly what's causing this. And at one point, he does crack and just smashes a hole in the bathroom wall where he believes that this foul stench is coming from. And
That's a
it's a
gorgeous
horror book.
page. That's a
Yeah,
gorgeous page.
absolutely. I think Zayas, who's the author, the artist, I think he did just a beautiful job rendering this. The colors are great too. I don't have it here. Lorenzo Scaramella and Dave Sharp on colors and lettering. They just do it. It's a great book. I'm not going to give away what happens here, just to say that it does descend into madness and despair and horror very quickly at the halfway point, and with a little bit of gruesome outcome here. But definitely a very interesting book. I do recommend it, especially if you like horror, and especially one and done. And also if you have a place to store these giant books, which I'm still working on that. But definitely a good pickup.
They do have magazine-sized boxes, Steve.
They do, but you have to buy them and then find a place to put the box. Although I now have a lot of space, I don't want to fill it up again with more and more short boxes.
I was just gonna say, I love Cullen Bunn, and this really sounds like and seems like his take on the yellow wallpaper, which is one of my favorite short stories of all the time, or the yellow paper, or I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
But also a good plug for me to say that he wrote my favorite comic book series, long form, one of my favorite comic book long form series, Harrow County. So
Yeah,
I'm never gonna not pitch that book.
absolutely. But yeah, definitely recommend it if you wanted just a one shot of Cullen Bunn goodness.
I love seeing Cullen's name on stuff. He's incredibly prolific writer and genuinely a good man. Like I have a lot of respect for him as a person. Have gotten to know him a little bit, so
Awesome.
really love hearing you talk about his stuff. So I will be last but not least. I'll keep it brief though. In February of 2022, we got book one. There's going to be some connective continuity here. It is a DC book, but it's also oversized, so it's like the two of you combined. In February of 2022, we got book one of Swamp Thing Green Hill, which I was really excited about because it is my favorite comic writer right now, and has been for several years. I've admitted the fact that I can't be objective anymore when it comes to him. I just love his stuff. Jeff Lemire is writing a Swamp Thing book. Doug Mahnke is doing the lines, and David Barron is doing the colors. Super excited about this. It is a post-apocalyptic Swamp Thing tale. Okay, that sells me. I'll take my money. And then in February of 2023, we got issue 2 of this 3-part series. So that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it is recent. Long story short, this is a post-apocalyptic world. You might consider that global warming has taken its toll on the world, and the sea levels have risen, and now land is scarce and people are scrounging to survive. Some folks have taken to just being weird pirates. Other folks have taken to just doing what they can, like Waterworld-esque type scenarios.
That is a great way to put them. Weird pirates.
Yeah,
That's a great way to put them.
yeah, just weird pirates. And they're trying to raise their families. The series, the book starts out. It's a father and daughter series, which Jeff Lemire does really well. Love when Jeff Lemire writes kids, and Jeff Lemire writes the relationship between parent and child really well. And a lot of his books focus on that. Someday, somebody smarter than I am, maybe our buddy Zach Crucy, is going to do a deep, in-depth analysis of like Jeff Lemire and child psychology. I'm not that person, but I really enjoy his work. So they're doing their thing, doing their best to survive. The parliaments, the the parliament of trees, the parliament of animals, the parliament of decay, whatever have you, got together and have decided that humanity has ran its course. They've done enough damage to the planet, and they are going to just end humanity as it speaks and as it exists, and they'll start over and go from there. So it pits the elements against mankind, and they create, or at least emerge, a very monstrous, soulless version of what might be a swamp thing, that comes in and decimates everything, and just is murdering people outright. Well, one of the pivotal figures in this is a young girl, a daughter, and they have an escape plan. Again, because we're pirates, they know to get out of there. One of her friends is this old hermit character, and so they jump in a motorboat and they go to a lighthouse. Who's in this lighthouse? Why not? Well, if you've read Swamp Thing before, you know the connection between John Constantine and Swamp Thing. So a very old John Constantine's chilling up in this lighthouse, and just like, hey, it took you long enough, and they're asking him for help. So he does what he does best and fucks over, a friend. And that friend happens to be Alec Holland, who had retired and was living the best life ever. Him and Anna and their child, were essentially out of this world, and living in another one to just exist. Pulls him out of that paradise back into this world. It's like, hey, humanity's at stake. You got to do your thing, and you don't really have a choice because I've bound you to this earth. And so he does. He goes and fights this really bastardized version of what might be himself, this kind of soulless swamp thing that's meant to end humankind. And the parliaments just all team up against him. They strip him of his powers. They take his ability to like tap into the green away, and it goes from there. But they've got another trick up their sleeve. So John Constantine goes to another person that we know from this world, and that is at the end of this story. It's revealed, and so spoilers. I think we've established that, but they rope in Maxine Baker, Animal Woman, into this as well. So you're getting to see a lot of these tangential characters in a post-apocalyptic, world-ending, humanity-ending story. No one writes the human condition, in my opinion, better than Jeff Lemire. I'm very excited about this. I don't particularly care or like that it took 2 years to get this, but we got it, and I'll happily read it. Went and pulled my issue 1 out of the boxes in the back, because I have one of those, the magazine size boxes, that I keep stuff in, and reread it. So Doug Mahnke does a great job. It is beautifully illustrated. I will say there is one particular panel in this that I'm convinced the reason it took a year for this to come out is Doug Mahnke was searching his archives for this. He knew somewhere that he had a Silver Surfer Galactus image that he just wanted to crib for Swamp Thing. And that's why it took him a year to find it. It was deep, deep, deep down in his files. But he finally found it and gave us this particular image that we see on screen, which is a Galactus and Silver Surfer panel that he co-opted for this book 100%. But I don't care. It's still gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. It cracked me up when I saw it. I'm like, I see what you did there, buddy. You're not fooling anybody. The curves of the Parliament tree in the back are totally a planet. But it's fun stuff. Yeah, like you can tell what it was, and I don't even, sometimes I get mad when I tell artists have lifted something, even their own work. I'm like, that's what, but I don't care with this. It's good stuff. So cannot wait for the third and what I think is the final issue of this. It's Jeff Lemire having a lot of fun. Again, I love that man. I love his works. He can do no wrong in my book. Even the books that are less than what Jeff Lemire should be are better than most other things. So I'm very happy with it, in my opinion. So go check out Swamp Thing Green Hell. If you're a Jeff Lemire fan, Swamp Thing fan, DC fan, you're going to like it.
It's also worth mentioning that if you did miss the original printing of the first issue, there is a new printing.
Yes.
It's basically the same apart from the green instead of white here, or instead of red here. When you were talking about a page that you loved, I just wanted to throw this one out, which I think is, it's gross, but it's beautiful, is when the rot is talking to the
Yes.
green
Yep.
through a dead bird and some of the few surviving blades of grass. I thought that was just conceptually brilliant.
Very poetic. Very poetic.
The reason I have this is I didn't check the solicitations closely enough, and I thought I was ordering issue 2, and sometimes
Yeah.
that happens. So sometimes I get like weird duplications from additional printing. So Caleb, I'm sure you have it, but if you don't, the printing of the Hulk facsimile is yours if you want it.
I do have it. But also, I will say, just on that point, I've got a pop I need to send to you. So thanks for the reminder.
Okay, great. Well, that nicely puts us into Geek Gets because some of my Geek Gets are pops. How do
You
you
don't
like
say.
that? How do you like that? When the Legion of Collectors boxes were happening through Funko, which was their like mystery boxes that they had, and it lasted I think like 2 years, but there was a lot of DC extended universe Funko Pops, and it was right then that I made the dumb decision of I'm going to collect them all if they're DC Extended Universe. So we still have a little bit of time with this universe, and I've got a few pops here, and they're all from Shazam: Fury of the Gods. So I have Hespera, and I have Anthea. Don't know who she is. And I have Calypso. Don't know who she is, but I got the pops and the Black Unicorn. So um, I hope these are cool in the film because I got the pops.
They better be. They better be
But
cool.
I'm really happy about the Flash because General Zod is one of the pops, and the General Zod is the only pop I'm missing from originally from Man of Steel, and it goes for not crazy bucks, but more than I'm willing to spend.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm happy to that because I'm happy to just get one version of the characters, but coming into the home stretch with those. So
Cool.
there we go. And Caleb, do you have a Geek Get?
I do. I have some. So I'll be real quick again. Ordered some coasters. It goes without saying I'm a fan of Tom of Finland. So got some new coasters that I wanted to show off. Really cool stuff. Tom of Finland esque coasters. All you have to do is Google Tom of Finland coasters. These will pop up. It's fun stuff. Also, if you've listened to the show, I'm a music fan. I've gotten into vinyl in the past couple of years just because why not? It's really fun. Also a fan of just TV and movies. Saw this and had to pick it up because why would I not? The soundtrack to Romy and Michelle's high school reunion. I saw this and I was like, oh no, we have to like. It's legitimately a great soundtrack, right? Like you've got the Go-Go's, you've got Bananarama, you've got Tears for Fears, you've got the Smithereens Culture Club and Belinda Carlisle, you've got the Vapors and Wang Chung. very, very good album. Super fun. Also, the most recent Sam Smith album, I copped that as well. Um, and I should say that recently won a Grammy, and it is the first time a trans woman for their song "Unholy." Um,
That has proven not to be the case.
oh, is it okay?
No, because if you go back, I believe one of the Grammys for Walter Carlos was awarded to her when she was Wendy Carlos. So
Okay.
that turned out to be incorrect, but it's still a massive achievement for a
Yes.
notable Grammy and not
Yes.
something in the classical category. So,
Yeah.
but that, and I have to say, like, I've hated Sam Smith stuff before.
Mhm.
I'm kind of liking this album. So,
I'm a fan of Sam Smith.
yeah,
I like.
I don't like his. He's exploring different territory with this
Yes.
album, and it's much more conducive to my likes. So,
I mean, I'm not historically a big pop fan, so like, when I say like I've liked the stuff because my husband listens to it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm used to it. But this particular, like, there's some really cool stuff in there. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm digging it. But
And also
that's mine.
good on him about body positivity.
Absolutely.
Good on him.
Although that one outfit was very strange, I thought that they were about to hunt down like Alice in Wonderland for the Queen.
Yeah.
So, but hey, look, Lady Gaga wore a meat dress,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this one up. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar here where we signify something, we effectively woof at it. And it may be a comic book, it may be a film, it may be a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
Well, my woof of the week is on a returning TV show, of course. And this one I've been anticipating it, very, very much for the past year since the second season had ended. This is the final season of the show, and that is Picard, the Star Trek series. It's the final season. In this one, they are reuniting pretty much the entire original cast from the Next Generation. We haven't seen any Natasha Yar. We haven't seen anything about Wesley Crusher possibly being in this. Although, of course, there was a cameo at the end of season 2 for Wesley. But we've got Gates McFadden here as Dr. Crusher. We've got Geordie LaForge. We've got everybody. It's looking pretty awesome. I'm super excited. Yes, it might be dark, but it's going to be awesome to see them all on screen again today, together again. So, Picard on Paramount Plus.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong. Michelle Hurd remains in the cast.
Yes, Michelle
Okay,
Hurd, as well as what's her name, 7 of 9.
Jerry Ryan. My
Jerry Ryan.
question is regarding the other characters, the other actors that were part of season 1 and 2. Is their dismissal make sense?
Yeah, they're just not part of this.
Okay,
So the story's not. Yeah, the story doesn't involve them
I didn't know if
currently.
it was like kind of, where did they
Where did they go? No,
go?
it's
He went out to
there's
the
really
he
no
went out
need to. Yeah, there's really no need to kind of like look at them or to go into with them. But it doesn't
yeah.
say that they can't make a cameo at some point, but probably not.
you're muted, Bill.
Uh-oh.
Nope. Okay, well, so I'll keep going. So I've got a happy wolf and a sad wolf while we're figuring out audio issues. This I'll start with the sad wolf first because we can capitalize off that and come up and make happy news. Found out this week that a person in the podcasting community in the comic book community unexpectedly passed away, and that's Mr. Darren Noel. Also just a really great guy by all accounts. I've never met him, but everything I've heard about him was fantastic. He was part of a podcasting group called the Legion of Substitute Podcasters. Did a great Wonder Woman cosplay, and was beloved. Like, for somebody who I did not know, and when Bill gets back on, Bill can speak to this a little bit too. But the morning that it was announced that he passed away, my feed was filled with just people expressing a lot of love for Darren. So I think it's important to shout that out, just to give our condolences. He was a member of the podcasting family, a member of the comic book family. So to his family and to his friends and to the Legion of Substitute Podcasters and everything, we want to send some love out to Darren and all the people who loved him. But my happy wolf this week goes out to another friend, a comics artist, a person who did a really cool book as a Kickstarter that I recently got my hands on, and that is Mr. Jeremy Hahn, who put together this through the pandemic. It was Hanthology. It's all short stories written and drawn by him. I adore Jeremy, and really cool. There is there's some queer representation in this. One of the first stories, the first pages, features a gay couple and their kids and the things that they're doing in life, just being all cutesy and stuff. And I really want to own this page. I really hope I get it. I don't know what the odds are of that, but I want to own it. So it also, like a lot of Kickstarters do, comes with some really cool ephemera. Jeremy designs his own stuff. Like, he designed the cover to that. So I've got a couple of pins that are essentially, if you know Jeremy, it's him, but it's him as Cthulhu, or as a Cthulhu monster. That's really cool. He sent a bunch of like stickers and stuff that tie into the story. I got that. So if you ever get a chance to back a Jeremy Hahn Kickstarter, do so. It's really cool. And the artwork and the stories are phenomenal. Like, seriously, this is one of very could be my favorite anthology of the year. So thank you, Jeremy. I loved it. Been expecting it for a little bit, and it did not disappoint. And can't wait to buy you a drink sometime soon. I miss you, buddy.
All right, cool. And I came in a little bit late, but I heard that you were offering our condolences to Darren Noel. And just personally, the very first, the only Comic Geek Speak con I went and I didn't know a soul. And Scott Coles and Paul French and Darren kind of adopted me at the bar that night and introduced me to people, and I will be forever grateful for that. And I chatted with Paul very briefly about Darren's passing, which was very unexpected. And if you have some opportunity, give a listen to some of the subs if you are into the Legion, because they take some very, very deep dives, and it's almost always pretty fun. So our deepest condolences repeated to Darren's family and also to the subs family. For my book of the week, Steve, I think we have a graphic. If you could put one up, the other graphic which leads into this graphic, thank you so much. I attended one of the nights of Elvis Costello's residency at the Gramercy Theater in New York City, 100 songs and more over 10 nights. What happened was he programmed 10 songs every night, and then beyond that was whatever he felt like playing, or if there was augmentation. One night he had horn section. That was the night I went. Last night, which was the final night, he actually had the full Imposters band with him. So between the 10 nights, I believe the total number was 236 songs that he played. So what has cast somewhat of a shadow over this is the passing of Burt Bacharach, and the album that they put together, Steve, if you can go to that, which is My Actual Wolf, which is Painted from Memory, Elvis Costello with Burt Bacharach, the new songs of Bacharach and Costello. This was released in 1998. It's a phenomenal album. If you're involved in a breakup or matters of the heart, maybe hold off there, because that's the terrain of a lot of the songs, but they're beautifully constructed songs. What had transpired in the last few months, though, was that Chuck Lorre of what did he put together? Will and Grace. That's Chuck Lorre.
Like 2.5 Men and
2.5 Men. Okay. He put together. He was interested. He's a big fan of Painted from Memory. Was interested in putting a musical together. They didn't really take off, but then all of the parties revisited it. And because it's only 12 songs, they were expanding it. So there were new Bacharach and Costello songs that were completed just late last year. There is an expanded version of this coming out called The Songs of Costello and Bacharach, coming out in March, late March or something. I don't have the exact date, but he played some of the new songs and they were wonderful. But it also naturally led me to revisiting this original source material. Beautiful album, beautifully constructed music, and that's my Wolf of the Week. And also, if you've never seen Costello live, I can't say this was the best show because his voice just wasn't in fantastic shape. And night 8 of 10, if that was my main concern, I probably should have gone to an earlier show. But it was my 41st time seeing Elvis Costello in concert. I would like to get to 52. I would like to say, I saw the equivalent of one weekend night every night of my life, of a year. I would love to say that, but not sure if I'll get there. But I've seen him many times. I'll continue to see him. And again, with the passing of Burt Bacharach, which we mentioned in the last show, it was a very bittersweet but very, very poignant way of celebrating that. So, woof. All right. That's our episode. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to write to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. If you want to listen to us, you can listen to us naturally downloading us through Apple Podcasts, listen to us through Stitcher Radio or many of the other podcasting platforms. And if you have joined us through Facebook Live tonight, thank you for joining us. If you're watching us later on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Would be much appreciated. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
You're going to hear Wolf and an Explosion. If you're listening to the audio version, we'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.